Reporting from Arkham Asylum, this is Gotham Rogues. In this video we spotlight Arnold Schwarzenegger's Mr. Freeze from the movie Batman and Robin. It's another episode of Batman movie villains, and we've now reached Mr. Freeze, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger in Joel Schumacher's Batman and Robin from 1997. In the movie we're introduced to Mr. Freeze, a new villain in town who steals diamonds, which he needs in the construction of a giant ice cannon capable of freezing the entire city. With this power, Freeze intends to hold Gotham hostage and extort billions of dollars, cash that he plans to use for the research of a cure for his terminally ill wife, Nora. Freeze himself is actually Dr. Victor Freeze, a scientist who suffered an accident in his laboratory, resulting in his body freezing and mutating, preventing him from surviving in above 0 degrees. To constantly stay cold and alive, Victor built a cryosuit, and he also armed himself with a cold gun. During one of his diamond heists, Freeze meets another new supervillain in town, Poison Ivy, played by Uma Thurman, who's accompanied by yet another new supervillain in town, Bane, played by Jeep Swenson. Oh god, why does there have to be so many of them? That means more of these Batman and Robin videos. Anyway, Freeze, Ivy and Bane team up for some reason, and together they shall freeze and heat up the entire city of Gotham, and then the world. And that's the villain plot. Who are we kidding here? We all know this Mr. Freeze sucks. Do I really have to do this? I mean, what's the point? Everything's already been said a million times already. Alright. So, in 1992, Mr. Freeze was basically completely reimagined in the animated series. The original Freeze was a pretty boring and generic ice-themed supervillain with very little depth and motivations, but the show changed all that and gave him a tragic origin complete with a dying wife. So when it came time to finally adapt the character for a big-budget movie 5 years later, the movie makers naturally chose to base their version on the new tragic Freeze. Schwarzenegger's Freeze is very similar to the one we saw in the TAS episodes Heart of Ice and Deep Freeze. He's essentially the same character, when it comes to background and motivation, I mean. But the portrayal, well, that's a whole other story. While all he's trying to do is save Nora, this Freeze is a cartoony clown who spouts ridiculous ice-themed jokes and puns, and awkward cliched supervillain lines. It's as if you took the animated series Freeze and gave him the demeanor and dialogue of the old comics version. That doesn't work. The TAS Freeze is supposed to have been turned into a cold man, both literally and figuratively, but this jovial, gleeful guy is clearly not cold on the inside. I can understand why they did it though, because Warner Brothers wanted this movie to be as goofy and juvenile as possible. It's a movie for 4-year-olds, and when you're at that age, you like cartoony, over-the-top, stereotypical supervillains. What I don't really understand is why they bother with the whole TAS origin and tragic angle in the first place. The original Freeze would have been just fine for this movie. You didn't need a cryogenically frozen wife Nora. All Victor could have been after here might as well have been freezing the city, cause he's a villain, duh. The sad elements of Freeze doesn't jive with the rest of this movie anyway. It almost pisses me off how they taint the TAS stuff by including it in this atrocity. It's an offense to the great writing that Paul Dini did on that show. I also gotta wonder how come they just skim over Freeze's origin. All we really get is some short footage from a video camera, just like with Two-Face in Batman Forever. I don't know what it is with screenwriter Akiva Goldsman, but he has a knack for skipping the greatest origins while focusing on the lesser ones. I'm not saying that Riddler and Poison Ivy's origins are bad. Those villains just aren't quite as defined by them like Dent and Freeze are. Victor's past and motivations are a large part of his character in this movie though, so it's actually handled better here than what it was with Two-Face in Forever. But as I said, the portrayal of the character and the tone of the movie as a whole ruins it all, so it's a moot point. I gotta question Victor's plot a bit. Why does he need to extort billions from the city? Can't he just steal the money like he's been stealing the diamonds? Or better yet, why doesn't he just use the diamonds to fund his research? Or really even, why does he need funds at all? Can't he just take whatever it is he needs for the research? He seems pretty unstoppable if it weren't for Batman and Robin. He should have just moved to another city and continued his crime spree there undisturbed. It's not like he has a vendetta or an obsession with Batman or Gotham. All the other rogues from the past both movies had that, so it made sense with them, but here with Freeze it doesn't. In the animated series, he wanted revenge on Ferris Boyle for pulling the plug on Nora, but there's no evil businessman to blame it on in this movie. Victor's own incompetence turned him into Mr. Freeze, which we see in the video footage, and Nora is well and safe in his possession. So what's the deal? Take your wife and go to Alaska or something. Also, what's he thinking, freezing the city and then letting Ivy turn it into a tropical jungle? How the hell is that going to work? Was Goldsman and Schumacher thinking at all here? It makes no sense that Mr. Freeze and Poison Ivy form an alliance. In fact, they are the last two villains who should team up. As for Arnold Schwarzenegger's performance, it's a large part why Freeze is so silly. He overacts like he's Turbo Man and clearly doesn't take the role seriously at all. But how could he? It's not written seriously. Nobody could have played this role well, not with all those puns and awful lines. And to make matters worse, Warner Brothers told Schumacher to tell his actors to ham it up. Under different circumstances, could Schwarzenegger have played a good Mr. Freeze? I guess he's not a bad actor like some people seem to think, but he's still ridiculously miscast. That accent is funny in an awesome way in movies like Predator and Total Recall, but it doesn't fit Freeze. Not the tragic Freeze at least. You're supposed to feel sorry for him, not laugh at him. Also, when I think of the scientist Victor Freeze, what pops up in my mind isn't exactly a massive Austrian bodybuilder. As if you couldn't have guessed it already, I don't like Freeze's design here. He looks goofy and toyetic. According to rumors, Kenner, the toy company, helped with the designs for this movie, and I can definitely see that. Victor kinda looks like a lame 90s action figure. The suit is awful, and I hate the helmet. It makes his head look like a light bulb. Why couldn't he just have gone with the domed look? He's also too blue. I think he should have been more white with a hint of blue. But of course they went overboard with the bright colors. His gun looks kind of silly as well, just like his suit is very toyetic. But the effects of the cold ray and his frozen victims are actually done really well. That's the one positive thing I'm going to say in this video. The cold gun effects are good. In conclusion, this is a terrible Mr. Freeze in a terrible movie. On paper he might seem good, that is if you removed all the crappy dialogue and puns, but the way they executed it in the actual film is absolutely horrendous. So there you have it. That's Arnold Schwarzenegger's Mr. Freeze. Next up in Batman movie villains, the crap fest continues as we take a look at Uma Thurman's Poison Ivy, unfortunately also from Batman and Robin. So stay tuned for that. And remember, Arkham Asylum awaits you in the next video.